Sometimes I dream in Farsi. I came to America when I was 9 months old. My dad was a PhD student at Purdue. "Where's your camel? It was too heavy to carry here." That's what my father said. He knew how to deal with discrimination. He had much worse growing up as a Baha'i in Iran. He would tell me since I was a child how difficult it was. "They persecute Baha'i for not being Muslim. My father was beaten by his best friend." My father told me these stories in Farsi until 1979. No more Farsi in the house, only English. After the Islamic Revolution, my parents decided not to return to Iran and make English the only language in the house. How would you show love to 9-year-old Pirooz right now? What would you do?
Just I try to be honest with you, not to be superficial.
I didn't notice we were that different from anyone else. I thought two cultures was normal. We were housed in the international housing of the university. All my friends were from different countries. My parents would speak to me in Farsi, and I would respond in English. "Pirooz, bia inja, gas side shod." 5 more minutes, Mom. My whole life was split like this. Inside the house was gourmet sabzi, Persian rugs, and eating on the floor. Outside was hamburgers, Star Wars, Scooby-Doo, and America. In fact, home was always Iran, and outside was America. Iran, America. Sometimes I would pretend this would happen as soon as I opened the door. My teacher was real nice in Indiana. "Read as many books as you can." Mrs. Ellis helped me win the readathon and gave me books on Dr. King and Gandhi. We moved to Delaware right after that. I was in the middle of 3rd grade. The Iran and Lebanon hostage crisis had just happened.
"Yankee, go home," they cried, but they made no attempt to harm him.
And things weren't good for Middle Easterners in America. Delaware, 1984.
Don't turn heartwarming times into heartaches. During these critical holiday driving days,
When I was 9 years old, a barber refused to cut my hair because I was Iranian.
One time we went to a new barbershop. I don't know why they changed it.
The barber threatened to call the cops.
He said he's going
He
to call
said
the
if
police.
you don't do it, we are going to call the police.
That made me cry. I thought they were going to take my dad away.
But I was so afraid.
The cops said he was sorry, but we had to leave. Now, I'm 42, but whenever I talk about it, I start crying. My therapist says this was a serious traumatic event, and I need help. She suggests doing a role play of the incident. I start filming all the role plays. I interview my family and friends. I take my dad to where it happened. Right now, what we've decided to do is to go to Delaware, to go to the barbershop where we actually experienced the racism, my father and I together. I watch Trump. I see immigrant children going through my nightmare. I see the world under pandemic. I see unarmed black men killed. I see America in 2 pieces. I film all of this along with my story, and I dream of a better day for all of us.
this is our house. What a nice house. You see that?
How does it feel? It's green now.
I like our house.
So come close to me so we can look at it together.
Yeah, very nice place to live.
I'm not sure where to start the film. I asked my cousin Mina to give me a few I remembers.
I remember when I was 6 years old, writing in my journal for class about how proud I was to be an Iranian American.
What else did you write in the journal? Is this where the film starts?
I wrote about how much I liked Gorma Sabzi.
The film started before this, back when I was making Apocalypse Later, my latest comedy. I decided instead of having a script, I'd let a group of artists, actors, and philosophers tell me what the film should be based on the title alone. Then we'd see it come alive based on their suggestions. If someone said they saw a group of hungry people scouring in the forest, and one of them says, "I'm hungry," then we would see this happening before cutting back to the table to hear more discussion. While I was in the middle of making this film, Kevin Ramsey, the actor, asked me what my apocalypse was.
I think the question that he asked has a lot to do with answering that question. When did it happen?
After Kevin asked me that and I cried, I knew something was wrong. Andy Chin, the camera operator, even ran in from the other room. He was so worried. I started therapy like 2 weeks later.
It takes great courage.
When I see those children on television,
I get it. He's reminding you of you.
Up, up with liberation. Up, up with liberation. Down, down with deportation. Down, down with deportation. Up, up with liberation. Up with liberation. Down, down with deportation.
They shouldn't be separated from their parents.
this is a building where I ended up doing therapy for about 3 months. Basically, I wanted to make sure that I didn't go crazy. But later today, we're gonna film me and my dad act out what happened to me when I was a little kid. This, I found out, is known as Gestalt theory, according to the therapist. And she was like, "You better try this out in a therapy session first." I said, "No, I'm gonna save it for the camera." Once the therapist suggested Gestalt therapy and doing role play, I had a beginning, but I didn't know where it would take me. So I filmed normal interviews, my mother and I going through picture albums.
And I was Batman?
Yeah, and this is you in Iran when we went for a visit. That's you.
Wow.
And also, this is you in Iran.
What was I like as a baby?
You were a good baby.
I filmed my dad and I watching Gandhi, the movie. My dad said Gandhi getting kicked out of the train was like me, because he starts fighting.
I was thinking about the other experience.
Which one?
When we went to the barbershop and they said...
Gandhi is like you in barbershop, my dad said.
So this is similar. People, it's just... we heard each other left and right. We don't know why.
I also filmed my little brother Pana talking about me and my family.
Very creative type of person. I think that's where a lot of my creativity stemmed from, was from those early days when you were in the band. And I mean, I can remember the funniest time when we were back in Sonny's basement, and like you guys were all like smoking and drinking, and I was like a little kid, 10 years old, and you were like, "Oh, get him to say the F word." I would get on the mic and just like start screaming like Rage Against the Machine.
This was all a warm-up for doing the role play with my dad. A nice woman cut my hair while I rehashed the story.
In front of me, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand. I was very confused. And then the next thing I know, the guy goes into the back of his store, and then he comes back out and he said, "I want you to get out. Get out of here. I don't want to cut your hair."
My dad said he was sorry I went through the situation, but he didn't think it was a big deal.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it had this much impact on you. I really didn't think about it. I was in the middle of it, and I really didn't feel any fear of anything. I said, we are not going to move from this place until you cut my son's hair.
He said he went through so much worse as a Baha'i in Iran.
I really thought this was very, very minor. because I have been through so many things. I thought
There's so much racism.
that was really a normal thing. I was expecting that. I saw that. That's what I never thought about. What is the impact of that interaction is going to have on you?
After that, I decided to go to Delaware, where the incident happened.
I was not here when we sold the house, so I don't know these people. Oh, look at that. They added that one. Welcome, very nice.
We went to the house first and rang the doorbell. No one was home, so we walked around the neighborhood.
Hi. How you doing?
Good. Can I help you?
Yeah. You used to be my neighbor. You are not. I used to live over here.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So when I sold it, I was not here. I just came back after 18 years. All the memories. I lived here 15 years.
Okay. Do we have to be on film right now?
No.
Okay.
No.
So,
No.
yeah. Well, I'm just seeing her off.
That's all right. But this used to be for Mrs. Kaczynski.
I
Yeah.
don't know
don't-
the name.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The house looked the same, my dad said. He really wanted to see his old house and go running.
What are you doing?
We ran into an old neighbor. Her son and I used to play together every day. Hello, my dad said. She was very nice.
Oh,
And I saw you, the last article that you put on about the barbershop.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to comment and say,
Oh.
are you going to say anything about when you used to come up here and play football?
Yeah, we used to play all the time.
Yeah.
Thank God we are here. What a blessing. What a beautiful day.
Take off your ANAC for 1 second.
What brings you guys back up? You guys moved to Buffalo?
Rochester,
He
New
made
York.
Rochester. Our actual next door neighbor, for 18 years, didn't recognize us.
Yeah, after 18 years coming back to our house, all the memories coming back.
Thought we were stealing.
We wanted to make
Now,
sure.
don't you have to ask me if you want to film
Yeah.
So turn that off.
Yes. Anyway, sorry to bother you.
No, we were.
This guy
So that's
there-
what. So our neighbor said her alarm went off. So.
Oh, yeah?
We were curious, like what was going on.
Oh,
okay.
sorry about that.
Just walked up to the front step and rang the doorbell. Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Take care.
Later, we went to the nature center near our old house.
Okay.
Comes around. I mean, it's.
Can I keep this?
Oh,
Is that
sorry.
okay?
My dad said he didn't think the neighbor was racist.
I don't believe that was serious discrimination. That's all I'm just saying.
Then I tried to explain microaggressions to him. If we're in this situation and it's this kind of racism that's intense and makes you feel so horrible, it's okay. But then this other one, you know, hey, it's just a little bit. Hey, it happens. Hey. My dad didn't believe in them.
I ring the bell. I say myself, who is this guy is doing here?
Yeah, but we had 2 examples, Dad. We rang Mrs. Forster's bell, and she came out and hugged both of us.
Because
And
we were very,
They were your next door neighbors, Dad, for 18 years.
yeah.
Yeah. And her response was, oh, I remember you.
Good to see
It
you.
wasn't a positive
She
thing.
was not part of a friendly person to begin with.
Growing up in Delaware before the incident was fairly idyllic. I spend most of my days playing tennis, baseball, and kick the can with all the kids in the neighborhood. When I wasn't playing, I did one of 2 things: make home movies or go with my father to Ashland Nature Center. I didn't realize it at the time, but these trips to the park were a return to the village of Talagan, where my father was raised. Although he hadn't been back to Iran since the revolution, taking my brothers and I to the Nature Center was his way of visiting home. It was on these walks that my father would tell my brothers and I stories about his life before America, recite Rumi, or explain his love for the universe.
خداوندا چگونه ترا شکر نمایم نعمت‌های ز نام تناهی است و شکرانه ما محدود چگونه محدود شکر نامحدود نماید از دست زبان که برآید که از عهده شکرش به در آید.
When my dad wasn't telling stories or poems on our nature hikes, his favorite pastime was debating, or as he called it, talking loudly.
But this is not about racism. This is you look like from a Middle Eastern person.
Okay, I'm not denying that.
So
when I say that I'm Iranian, I'm also acknowledging that I'm Middle Eastern.
I don't see racism. That's what I should say. This is nationalism. This is really trying to generalize and putting you in a corner so you are a terrorist or something. No, I'm just saying if people, they generalize it like that, we are just talking loudly. So what I'm trying to say, when I say there is no racism, I don't see...
So you're saying the woman treated me like I was a terrorist, but that's not racism?
That's not racism.
Racism is working 20 years and they don't give you pension. What happened to you is like this pine needle in comparison.
Pine needle comparing to a pine needle to a tree. They are different stories.
Yeah, but look at how many pine needles there are. I looked at the pine needles on the forest floor. I told my dad if we don't deal with pine needles, they'll multiply.
I'm just saying we cannot sweat for little things. We have to stand up for the big thing that really changed.
If you let one pine needle go, then they'll build up and cover the whole forest floor, I said. My dad got quiet for a second.
What can I say?
Then we drove to the original barbershop where the incident happened. My dad stayed in the car while I went inside. Hey, how are you? How long has this place been a barbershop?
An actual barbershop, probably since the 60s.
Since the 60s?
Yeah.
Has it always been the same owner?
No, it's been, I know, at least 4.
4? Yeah. The guy who ran the barbershop had sold it off long ago. So my dad and I just stood outside the shop. So I found out the guy's name. I found out the old barber was still alive. He was here 50 years. His name was Ali.
Ali.
He said he came in for a haircut 1 year ago. So he's still around.
What can we do?
I thought about finding him. So you remember, after we had this experience here, we went to that barber shop right there, across the street. We can go to the shop across the street, I said. And that guy was so nice to us.
You remember him when massage your head like this?
Yeah, he was a nice old man.
That was really nice.
The shop across the street became our go-to barbershop for years after that. So we decided to visit and see if we recognized anyone. In the car, I complained about karma. Well, I think we've just proven that there's no such thing as karma. I figured the guy would have been struck by lightning or something. I can't believe he's still alive, I said. My dad tried to say something to lift my spirits.
Is there if you have conscience? If you don't have conscience, there is no karma.
I tuned him out. I'm gonna do a U-turn here.
You think the mobs, they have karma? They're going to pay a price for their karma? Do you think so? This Mr. Tramboli, is it responsible for his action? You said, people, they have to be responsible for their, accountable for their behavior and conduct. President is conning everyone and dividing everybody.
My dad was quick to launch on Trump as a villain for everything that was wrong with America. I wasn't so sure. I had already made a film interviewing people from around the world about their reactions to the president winning the election.
And when I woke up, he was the president,
Hearing their responses, I realized people either loved him. So you were really happy?
I was pretty happy.
Or they didn't.
I don't even need the sexism. I don't need the misogyny and the predatory behavior.
But his various antics didn't change their opinions. It just got people to be more vocal about it. I also wasn't so sure karma was non-existent. The barbershop that treated us so well was thriving, while the barbershop the guy sold didn't have a single customer. Who knows what happened to that barber? Maybe my dad was right. Maybe nothing. Still, it was good to be at the barbershop across the street and be treated so well. My dad even went over to where our old barber Tom used to cut our hair and started chatting up everyone about how great he was. A couple of the older barbers told us he had passed away, but they appreciated all the nice things my dad had to say about him and the shop.
چه حاصل از آشنایی ها گر پس از آن بود جدایی ها با تو چه مهربانی ها تو و با من چه بی وفایی ها.
After we left the barbershop, my dad wanted to go for a run, so we dropped him off and headed off to my middle school. I know I told my dad that we would go to my high school, but for some reason I wanted to go to my middle school. Both the same name, Alexis I High School, Alexis I Middle School. This is where I was right after the incident. Luckily, I had some great teachers who helped me get involved in the arts and move past what had just happened. I started singing and acting and doing lots of theater. Then, in 1989, I met Jay Cheeseman.
Claire, I'll ask you a question. Word has just come in that John Brown...
He was this popular world history teacher at Alexis I Middle School that really cared about his students.
I've got to ask all these governors over here, do you support the methods of
He arranged field trips to Russia and Williamsburg, had us role play and debate the drafting of the Constitution, and during our last lesson on the Civil Rights Movement, he offered us an option to make a film.
It is the year 1990. This is our conclusion of what would happen if the South had won during the Civil War.
I came up with a film called Slave Chase.
Yes, the hell with them.
It follows a slave in the year 1990 and his attempted escape from his owners. It ends with his death.
Killed us a nigga.
I didn't realize I was being controversial with the film. I didn't even connect my experience at the barbershop with what I was making, or even think that much of the film itself. But Mr. Cheeseman thought directing was all I needed to be doing. He told me he didn't want me to come to study period anymore. He just wanted me to keep making movies. So I did. My dad didn't see any future in me doing art. He thought it was a waste of time. Like most immigrant families, the expectation was that I'd become a doctor or a lawyer. That never happened, though.
Have you ever seen the bear?
I started making films at 12, and once I got brave enough, I made a bunch more as an adult. I was thinking about all that as we drove to Philly to screen my latest film, Control-Alt-Delete.
Number 3, Mariah Carey, in her song, she doesn't even...
I was a bit worried what my dad would think. I had put him in the movie, and he had yet to make it through any of my other films.
Wanted to go for visit one of the holy places.
My dad believed in me and the American dream, as long as it was on a path he approved of, such as science and medicine. But if you stepped out of that zone, you were in a whirlwind of disapproval. Ready? Still, there were some things my father and I did see eye to eye on. One of them was Rocky. When we got to Philly, I thought it'd be nice to bond with my dad at the Rocky statue at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Give me a handshake here. All right.
All right, Rocky.
All right, Rocky. My dad and I have been visiting the Rocky statue and museum since I was 9 years old and moved to Delaware. I used to come here every Sunday. It's free on Sundays. I don't know if it still is or not. I guess Rocky was the closest we had to an immigrant hero. There weren't really any other famous immigrants or Middle Easterners. We had Omar Sharif, then there was Bruce Lee, the Godfather films, and Rocky. It's beautiful.
Enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
For my dad, Rocky was in line with his American dream as an immigrant. Fight against impossible odds, and if you work hard enough, you succeed.
Uh-oh, look who's here.
My cousin Mina met us at the top of the steps.
You have to climb up the steps and then raise your arms.
You gotta run. Come on. I like that.
And my dad started crying right away. Anytime family was around, my dad got a bit emotional. You gotta understand that we were pretty much alone as immigrants, especially if you came over after the Iranian Revolution. There wasn't some big Iranian community in Delaware. I didn't even get to meet my grandparents because of visa regulations to Iran until I was 18. My dad had to wait that long too, because he couldn't go back because he was Baha'i and a scientist. So there was always the worry he'd be jailed if he returned. And my cousin Mina, whose parents had escaped as Baha'i refugees after the revolution, not right before like us, had it even harder. I know what you're thinking. What's a Baha'i? Well, my mother was Muslim, and my father and his entire family, including my uncle, were Baha'is. That was a big no-no in Iran. Baha'is were considered a heretical religious faith since it was established in 1862. The religion had tenets such as the equality of men and women and a call to the end of prejudice and discrimination. Naturally, it was quickly condemned by the predominantly Islamic country of Iran at the time, where thousands were persecuted and killed for their beliefs. After Khomeini instated the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979, those who were non-Muslims, especially Baha'is, were targeted and forced to convert to Islam or lose their jobs, homes, or lives. In 1985, the same year my father was standing up to the barber, My uncle escaped the country pretending to be a nomad on a camel, and then spent months in Austria and Pakistan before he finally got political asylum to arrive in America. So when my dad saw Mina and then his brother, he got emotional. He knew what it took for them to be there. He had petitioned and gotten a visa for my uncle and his wife to enter the country. That made my father incredibly grateful and proud to be an American, a place where you weren't killed for your religious beliefs. For him, this was enough. And these moments, these reunions, were a chance to pay homage for the family's survival and simultaneously glimpse the past in Talagan before all this happened.
Good to see you. My God.
Mina and I left our dads to catch up while we went to the theater to get things ready for the screening. I was forewalling the event, and we were going to have a DJ, Mina, and then some performances from poets and musicians. I even got one of my old bandmates, Kevin Tarzanin, to do a couple songs. After he performed, he got on camera and told some stories about how I was often treated differently while I was in Delaware.
You know, Delaware wasn't always open-minded. I mean, it is a state that, Perry Farrell got beat up at Denny's, I think, after they performed. And I remember you getting heckled once at one of our shows, and you heckling the guy back so much that he had nothing to say but to throw a bottle at you, which you very stealthily got out of the way for and smashed against the back wall.
I didn't even notice I was different back then. You've got to understand that because I grew up in this small town, everyone knew everyone. That's the kind of amazing thing about small towns. All races disappear for most folks. It's only when you go where people don't know you or forget about you
Now, don't you have to ask me if you want to film?
that stereotypes come into play.
There is nothing I can do. This is my habit. You speak and just put my poison inside other animal or people. This is the way I am.
After the screening, my dad ran up to me really excited. "You are a good actor!" I nearly cried right there. It was the first time my dad had ever complimented me. I thought that maybe the role plays and making the film were finally bringing us closer. That made me excited to keep going on the film. So once we got back to Rochester, I started filming my family again.
What's the word of the day for him?
Love.
Courage.
Without struggle, a caterpillar does not become a butterfly.
Oh my God. He said one word.
That was one word.
That was 8.
Kept doing the role plays with my dad, and then I did a few with my mother. She had no idea I'd been turned away at the barbershop.
Because, I didn't come to the barbershop and nobody talked to me about it, what happened. I didn't know up to now.
I was surprised my mother was willing to admit racism while my father wasn't.
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember anything?
There were so many times, so many places.
That gave me some consolation. The role plays with my dad weren't really going anywhere.
It's not normal to go through something like that at such a young age. It's
I think,
obviously very difficult. So
I am really used to it.
yeah, I understand that you are.
We just kept having the same arguments about microaggressions.
I don't believe the problem we see outside, its source is inside.
Then one of my students, Brooke, got in on the action.
In my experience, when I hear people that I'm around talk about race relations and maybe more specifically the shootings that go on with the police.
She tried to explain that a 9-year-old kid being treated the way I was clearly racism.
Sometimes, unfortunately, in those scenarios, there seems to be shades of gray and people aren't too keen to place the word racism on the situation. But I think within the story that Pirooz told me, it's very explicitly an act of racism. And I think anybody in their right mind that would hear that story couldn't argue it any other way.
My dad didn't budge, though.
Yeah. It's something deeper, much deeper than racism.
He kept saying how I needed to be stronger, and that was the only way to face discrimination.
So do you see what I'm saying? So you can be really strong. It doesn't matter what is going on around you.
I was familiar with this deflection. I had heard it most of my life. If things were unfair or difficult, you just had to work harder or be stronger.
See, my problem is my weakness is not outside, it's here.
I remember one time he kicked me while we were playing soccer. I cried and grabbed my leg. He told me to stop being a baby and get up and play. I told him it really hurt, but he didn't believe me. I ended up going to the hospital and being on crutches for a couple months. That's one example, but there are hundreds of others.
There is no many of me inside me. There is one, then I am strong. Then it doesn't matter who is going to discriminate against me.
I imagine my mother being able to explain things to him. You know what Dad said to me? Be strong. Just stop crying.
No, you have to let everything come out, make you comfortable.
You can't keep inside. That makes cancer.
When it stays there, it's like a cancer. It will eat you all the time, all of your life.
I stopped trying to force the issue or even have an expectation from him during the role play.
Spoiled within, inside, then dies.
You know, it's interesting though, because it's like you're encouraging this kind of strength, like, oh, it's okay, be tough. But I think that the point here is that when it's a 9-year-old child, it's not a situation where you just say, toughen up. I don't know if that's actually the right approach for a child. He had his perspective, and that was that.
A tree, it doesn't die right away. If you look at every tree when it's dead, it died within.
I suppose this was a remnant of the male-dominated Iranian culture my father carried with him.
This problem that you see outside, the source of it is inside.
That's why I wanted to do a road trip across the country with my cousin Mina to see my writing teacher, Bobby Louise Hawkins. I figured it'd be good to have Mina's perspective on what her struggles were like in comparison to mine. I also figured any chance to have Bobby in something was a win-win.
When my cousin Marilyn was a kid, she was skinny and knobby with cottony flyaway hair and a built-in twist to her mouth.
I had met Bobby when I started going to school for writing at the Jack Kerouac School, started by Allen Ginsberg and Ann Waldman. She had me write all these stories about my family. And then she told me one day, a good writer is a good talker, and a good talker is a good writer. So we would talk our stories to each other. I figured it'd be healing to have her in the film. I also suppose that's what all of this was becoming. The role plays, revisiting Delaware, and then a road trip to Bobby. I was picking up the pieces that had helped me after the incident, the people and events that made me feel whole again. And maybe they were both healing in the past and to remember now. About a month before we headed off on the road trip, I found out Bobby passed away.
My mother's people were incredible storytellers, so that when there was no electricity, and as it would get dark, they'd put kerosene lamps out on the table. And everyone would sit around the table, and the children, if they could get by with it, would be leaning against the wall, sitting on the floor. But of course, as soon as the adults' attention was caught by any of the children were sent to bed. But until that happened, there were these ongoing stories, so that those stories, I realized, got honed through this process.
David Gardner, a fellow student of hers, interviewed me for his podcast shortly afterwards.
The amazing thing is watching or reading about that story and then hearing about how your dad reacted to it.
We talked about the film, Bobby, and death.
When you were attempting to try to recreate that scene with him. And I think the emotion that comes off of what you were writing in that actual blog post, it was unbelievable.
David related to my grief and pain of racial trauma. For him, it took him right back to the death of his father.
My father he was a very strong person, strong-willed person.
I thought it was interesting that my pain kept bringing up death. My mother.
Because I was there in Iran with the situation happened to Amir. I was giving my brother and my sister-in-law time, and I told them, just start crying, it's okay.
The stylist at the salon, Samantha.
He wasn't able to work anymore, and I think that really changed my perspective because he died a couple times on the operating table.
David.
And he also expected, I think, of his own children to be that way too.
I guess experiencing racial trauma is a lot like going through the pain of losing someone. It marks you with an incredible grief that changes you and never quite goes away. Especially if you experience it as a child, because in this case, the pain isn't about losing someone else. It's about losing a part of you. I posted about the salon on my blog. In fact, anything that happened, I posted. Every time I posted, my friend Brad Warner would email me telling me how I was getting racism wrong. When I posted about my encounter with a neighbor, he said to be careful to call people racists, and that my neighbor might have been scared at the cameras. Brad was a Zen teacher.
For me, punk rock and Zen are connected.
So I figured it'd be good to have a different perspective. I had made a documentary about him and lots of other films.
When I was younger, I was searching for something authentic.
So I trusted what he had to say. He was an actual Zen priest. I wasn't. I also wanted to know how he viewed race. So I asked him in another email. You don't see race? Race is a tribal thing, Brad said. Something very similar to my dad's perspective.
I don't see racism, that's what I say. This is nationalism.
Brad also believed I was jumping to conclusions too soon with everyone, like I had been triggered. I understood Brad's perspective. He was worried if I continued examining this wound over and over, I'd form a knee-jerk reaction to everything. But it still didn't excuse the neighbor's behavior. It didn't make it okay. Sometimes we'd go back and forth on our opinions 3 times a day. I'd give my reasons, he'd give his. I got other people's opinions too, but aside from Brad's critiques, most people were being supportive of the film. Dan, a friend from high school, sent a nice message about how I welcomed him as a new kid to Delaware when he was 9 years old.
He introduced himself, Pirooz. He welcomed me to the class. He asked me where I'd moved from. He introduced me to his friend Neil. They saved me a spot at the lunch table.
I also noticed most of the folks who were being supportive were close to my age or younger. So I figured Brad and my father's differences of opinion were more of a generational thing. I also thought Brad might understand better if we talked about it some more in person. So I suggested we chat on camera when we got to the end of the road trip, and he agreed. So I stopped emailing and started the road trip from New York to LA just a little bit after that. Mina flew from Philly to Rochester. I picked her up at the airport and we started. We would head west and meet Aaron in Boulder. On the second day of the road trip, Mina and I got pulled over in Ohio. The cop didn't think my new car belonged to me.
So today we drove through Ohio and a cop pulled us over. The first thing he asked us was whether or not we had stolen the car.
He kept us for over an hour as he checked my flawless record. Then, he reluctantly only gave us a speeding ticket. Mina was really shaken up after that.
I was so worried something was gonna happen to Pirooz.
I had to pull over at a road stop because she started having a panic attack.
We pulled over at a rest stop afterwards and I just couldn't stop crying.
Mina was crying a lot, saying she was afraid they were going to take me away.
The last time I had been in a car, was pulled over, my ex was thrown in cuffs for no reason.
I wrote about what happened on the blog. Brad wrote and said he didn't think the cop was a racist. He said it was a speed trap. That seemed a bit peculiar to me.
And the fact that this cop was convinced that we were criminals.
And I explained the situation over again, how there were other cars flying past and we were kept for over an hour, but he still wasn't convinced and said I couldn't prove it one way or the other. That seemed a consistent argument against racism, and I understood it. So you're saying the woman treated me like I was a terrorist, but that's not racist? Most people aren't ready to call microaggressions racism.
That's not racism.
Because they want proof. It's only after there's videos showing people being blatantly racist
Hey, tell them to go back where they belong.
that they're unwilling to argue that position anymore. And if they're being stubborn, then they can always say the person throwing racial slurs was provoked. It wasn't a positive thing.
She was not part of a friendly person to begin with.
That is, unless the scene is so hard that it sparks riots and civil unrest. After we picked up Aaron in Boulder, I told him about Brad's emails. Aaron wasn't too happy about them. He said a friend wouldn't do this to a friend going through trauma. Nina was also upset. I realized the two of them had different positions because they were millennials and people of color. They didn't need me to explain how systemic racism operated. They already understood how any country which had a dominant ethnicity in charge would result in various levels of discrimination and prejudice. This was simply a fact for them. And my father and Brad represented, in their own ways, a dated perspective on unity. It wasn't exactly racist, although it seemed that way to Aaron and Mina. They were simply operating based on their generation's standards. My father was used to facing racial slurs and discrimination on a daily basis.
I am really used to it.
So for him, turning the other cheek was the only way forward.
There is no many of me inside me. There is one, then I am strong. Then doesn't matter who is going to discriminate against me.
Brad was a punk rocking Buddhist who knew that if the universe and everything in it was interconnected,
Form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
then creating separations wouldn't actually bring people closer.
And I remember thinking, that's right.
It would actually create more friction.
So do you see what I'm saying? So you can be really strong. It doesn't matter what is going on around you.
I understood both my father and Brad.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really scary being out here, guys.
But I also understood Mina and Aaron.
I mean, I know the Midwest is, well, I shouldn't stereotype, but
I could see that allowing for things to happen without challenging them wouldn't actually help change things. There had to be confrontations.
What can I say?
Protests and unrest before those things that weren't part of the dominant mindset could be heard. I figured coming to the Jack Kerouac School at Naropa University was the perfect place to continue this discussion. It was here, after all, where being political was encouraged and a big part of the 60s ethos from which this school was created. My friend Achilles met us on campus.
I often think that, the experience of the first generation who's straddling both cultures is one of alienation.
He talked about what it was like to be ethnically ambiguous and how he could easily be mistaken to be Middle Eastern.
And the reason is because you don't fall within the culture from whence you came, because you've been separated from it, right? But you're not fully accepted or embraced, particularly somebody like me with an ethnically ambiguous look and accent. It's just very confusing to people.
Then he reminded me what life was like after 9/11 while we were going to school there.
That was an interesting period of not even feeling safe or having to have a certain degree of awareness, just because I look how I look.
I had forgotten Achilles had been attacked.
We were walking down to the Sundown Saloon one night.
It was us, yeah.
And this...
it was you, it happened to you.
It happened to me.
I was a bit shocked. The barbershop.
I think the question that he asked has a lot to do with answering that question. When did it happen?
Kevin.
Heckling the guy back so much that he had nothing to say but to throw a bottle at you.
It was like any time I experienced racially charged incidents, I had just removed them from my memory.
Yeah, this guy walked up to me and grabbed me and just started spouting every racist epithet about Arabs.
As Achilles explained the temperature of the country at the time,
I think we could tell that the world wouldn't be the same.
It all came flooding back. I remember being pulled over 3 times in a week in Boulder. And then my friend Santee, a Native American poet, calling me to see if I was okay. "You're the new #1, he told me. I was taken aback by this, but I understood what he meant. Middle Easterners would now be a point of focus and attack for the rest of the country, and we were. In those first couple weeks after September 11th, there were 99 attacks involving at least 128 victims and 171 perpetrators in convenience stores, on the streets, at gas stations, colleges, and places of worship. And I don't think it's an accident that when Kevin Ramsey asked me about my apocalypse in 2016 was when hate crimes against Middle Easterners soared to their highest levels since the aftermath of 9/11. President Trump had just made vitriolic comments squarely blaming American Muslims for a string of terrorist attacks in Europe and the US. He then followed this with an eventual call for an immigration ban on Muslims.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
My apocalypse had happened before, was now happening again. I thought about all this before Achilles brought me back to grief and loss again.
You know, right now I'm having
Achilles talked about losing his wife.
A lot of presence over Katie's passing. And I just saw this entire chapter of my life that I haven't dealt with, but I just cried. And so my dream last night was of Katie.
Then about losing Bobby.
That hit me so hard because that was like the last one.
It seemed only natural after Achilles mentioned Bobby that we visit her old house. We stood outside and listened to her reading a poem on Mina's phone.
The trees were large and old and went down when they widened the streets across this whole nation, part and parcel with when the cars went big as a value, big streets for big cars. That kind of trashy thinking where the exterior was suddenly the winner and got all the goods. What in God's name did they think was going to come down those streets that needed that much room? Forward thinking, like cargo cults put their little piece of landing strip in the middle of their home place and wait for the great silver gods that have gone into the sky and pass over their heads to notice, see, we have made a place for you dug into the body of our place, and we wait. See, we wait. And the trees went down, and the houses that had been dappled with shade and private, each one a thing, they got dumped onto the street and stood exposed and naked, and now you could see things about them as that there had been only 3 patterns the builder used, and seeing the same house repeated cheapened it, and the houses shamefully acknowledged their new condition by becoming whatever sign was nailed to the front: Realtor, Sunshine Insurance, Inc., Massage, Artistic Framers. And the gods never came. The streets never justified their widening. The cars got smaller, shrank as the years passed. They had lost their chance. The cars were finally not what they had tried to be in the greater American imagination. Remember how we deplored it? Think how long we hated the growing cars, and it kept continuing to be just the same. Remember, we were deploring it even as they were putting the sharp fins on the back that literally killed people by stabbing them when all the driver meant was to back up. That could have been when the cars were fighting back, and they lost. And in the wake of that war, a lot of litter and ugliness. And we got left with all those streets.
That's like such the perfect Bobby piece. I've been thinking a lot about Bobby too, you know, because she would, I'm gonna cry with you.
Then Achilles reminded us about Bobby's idea that we were always in a state of becoming.
She was somebody who had understood a long time ago that we will always be unfinished, and that we can only be the witnesses to our own unfinishings.
We drove to Utah after that. Mina read Brad's emails again and got upset.
May lead you to wrong conclusions. For example, a cop pulls you over, the cop is white, you are not.
Brad's email talked about how once you see racism, it'll make you see it everywhere.
Therefore, he pulled you over because of racism. But maybe it's actually a speed trap. This is a very common thing that cops do.
Mina felt like Brad was gaslighting me. She didn't understand why he didn't believe me when I said the cop was treating us differently. This guy has some nerve, she said.
This is fear, the backlash of white people when anyone brings up race, is they immediately throw down this narrative, exactly what he said.
I knew that Brad and I didn't see in exactly the same way, but I knew he loved me. I knew Mina loved me, and so did Aaron. Everyone wanted the best for me, and they all thought they were right. But I started to realize something after Achilles mentioned Bobby. Maybe none of us was right. Maybe we were all in a state of becoming better versions of ourselves. Mina wasn't convinced that Brad wasn't actually doing harm. She thought I was giving him too much credit. She also thought Brad's logic was off, because racism wasn't some illusion. It existed, and it was something that you felt deep in your gut.
Once you notice racism as if we didn't notice it before, and then we were guided towards it by some invisible hand, that then we will forever see racism in every one of our interactions. But that is a logical fallacy, because that's predicated by the fact that I mentioned a second ago, that racism is not something that finds you and eventually you notice. You feel it deep in your gut.
I understood Mina's perspective. If someone thinks you're robbing a house by ringing a doorbell, or that you stole a car by getting caught in a speed trap, that isn't an imagined scenario. That actually happened.
When someone judges us based on whatever appearance our may be, that is the problem.
But I was hesitant to dismiss Brad's position. He was my friend and his Zen master. So I thought about the possibility. What if the cop just pulled us over because of a speed trap? What if my father was right and the neighbor was just a mean person to begin
She
with?
was not part of a friendly person to begin with.
What if it was a little bit of everything?
Thank you for that fairness in Iowa.
Then Mina talked about how Brad not believing me was equal to people dismissing racism entirely.
Racism is like the tipping point for why a lot of things happen the way they do.
And it was only if people of color screamed or bled that people would believe it.
And if we ignore that, then we're basically asking people of color to grin and bear every single racist incident unless they're physically harmed, and that it's only when you bleed, literally bleed, that you can scream about it.
That made sense to me, and it made me rethink things again as we kept driving. I could see Brad's perspective that it was easy for people to see racism and everything and become overreactionary.
So we were cute, like.
But I wasn't overreacting with a neighbor.
We just walked up to the front step and rang the doorbell.
Okay.
I apologize for any inconvenience.
I was completely calm. In fact, I started to recognize something as we drove. When the neighbor came up to us, I immediately went to the same feeling in my gut, like I did when the barber refused to cut my hair. I was in a defensive mode, almost like I had been trained for it. I felt the same way with the cop. I didn't feel like I was just getting a ticket. If I was, it wouldn't have been an hour-long experience. I wouldn't have felt like I was in danger. And why would I need to have my car checked to see if it was stolen on a routine speed trap?
And the fact that this cop was convinced that we were criminals.
That's when I realized this wasn't an imagined situation that could be explained away by saying everything was an illusion. I could take my dad's advice and make myself stronger within to face it.
There is one, then I am strong.
But there could be no preparation for how you handled yourself during such a moment. It was what it was. And Mina was right. All you felt was horrible after it happened. Mina and I talked about what happened on the road trip after that.
I mean, you've been in every state.
Man,
Ohio.
Ohio?
She said that it was all the bad things that could have happened. We got pulled over.
And a cop pulled us over.
Got stuck in a hailstorm. And once we got to Utah, she announced she wasn't going to go back home to Philly. She was going to stay in LA with us. That got me worried for her. She was wild and young, and I immediately got protective. Once we got to Vegas, she and I had a heart-to-heart. We stopped at a road stop and talked about various things.
I'm gonna book a flight when I get back. Maybe even in the car.
Holy shit.
Just so I, have something to cling to. So no matter what's said to me or what I'm worried about, there's this concrete thing that I can look forward to.
This is what we had been doing the whole time, although we weren't filming every moment. I suppose she was helping me pick up a piece of the puzzle too, where my father had just offered me solutions.
It's only love make me strong.
Or my mother was more tight-lipped about revealing too much.
The same thing.
Mina was able to just listen and offer support.
I don't have to secondhand explain myself to you.
But I was getting more emotional than ever. It seemed like the more I examined the wound, the worse I was getting. So when we got to LA, I decided to do another role play of the barbershop incident, but with professional actors to see if that would help. Kevin Ramsey and Ray Haratian came back and talked about their reactions to when I first broke down in 2016.
I felt like I'm peeking into your bedroom. You're having a moment.
Ray was shaken up and worried about me.
I wasn't sure how to digest it, or how I wasn't sure if I can even sit there and be present to it. Almost like I'm prying into you.
I thought I wouldn't cry this time, but I was even worse. Kevin told me to keep going on the film.
Your work allows us the kind of transparency, a kind of let's take off the mask.
So I willed myself to keep going and do an edit of the film. It was pretty hard. I just cry for 8 hours a day watching myself cry. Aaron wanted me to get someone else to edit the film, but we couldn't afford it. So I managed to do a rough edit of the film. Brad hated it. He said therapy should never be on film. I suggested Brad come over to express his opinions on race to the camera. He came and drew dinosaurs. He was pretty nervous.
It's an interesting idea for a film. I'm still not sure, as we discussed at length this morning, I'm still not sure exactly what you're trying to do with it.
I wanted him to read his emails, but he refused.
But I think...
I tried to get him to talk about that, too.
Because...
People will think I'm a racist, he said.
Yeah, maybe I should just shut up and not talk at all.
Then Brad talked about a recent petition called Stand Against Suffering, signed by various Buddhists against Donald Trump's administration.
You know, once Trump got elected, among the Buddhists who put this thing up called Stand Against Suffering, you know, it was this big article signed by 1,100, I don't know how many, it was like 250 Buddhist teachers or something like that.
He said he thought they were taking things in a not-so-great direction.
I thought they were taking things in a not-so-great direction.
I half understood Brad. I could see that he was hesitant to jump on the bandwagon of anything.
I thought somebody needed to say something counter to that.
I could also see how Brad's hold to remain neutral, or see the other side when everyone was saying Trump was bad, could be misconstrued as racist, so he didn't want to say anything at all.
So people, it's easy to take this the wrong way. But I don't understand it, but I accept that there might be reasons other than I'm just a big, bad, scary racist and I like Trump because he's a racist too. You know, I think there might be other reasons that people supported him or supported the movement that they thought he represented.
Then he mentioned his nephew as an example of someone who was like that.
My nephew was like supporting Trump, and he thought he has a weird perspective on Trump because he thinks you'd have to talk to him to get his perspective.
Brad said that his nephew started a pro-Trump fake news site for money, and that he did it to tear down the political system.
That it needs somebody
like him to
somebody like that
sabotage
to just go, you know, and blow the whole thing up.
Then Brad talked about getting beaten up for being white by 2 African-American guys in Ohio.
You know, short version of the story is they just started running after us, and after a while were punching us, you know.
A few days after we filmed that talk, I sent Brad a post about those MAGA kids who taunted a Native American elder.
You have this picture-perfect, young, white, smug MAGA kid facing off against an elderly Native American, and this is a symbolic image we're all too familiar with throughout history.
It basically said that those kids weren't being nice.
He deserves to be surrounded by this crowd of kids who then proceed to mock him and throw up the tomahawk chop.
I thought it presented both sides pretty well.
This one nerdy kid steps up to impress the rest of his group, and, you know, he just stares. I mean, what's the alternative? I really don't know. Do they deserve to be doxxed and vilified on the internet? No, they don't. The media definitely went a little overboard with the way they crafted the narrative here.
But Brad complained it was fake news. He felt like I was consumed with seeing things as racism when they weren't, and he wanted to take a break from our friendship. I was shocked sending a post made me lose a friend.
It's cute, huh?
Yeah, I like the picture.
What about this one?
My dad said to give him time, then he'd come along.
Why is it in French?
Dude, you're killing me.
I thought back to our previous talk in relation to the post I shared. I could see that Brad was upset that the MAGA kids were painted in a certain light, especially when some trolls on the internet started saying things like they deserve to be punched in the face. That was an awful thing to say, and I could see that Brad defending against such remarks was also in defense of his nephew, or even himself after getting beaten up.
And next thing I knew, I'm getting punched in the head.
I could see Brad's position was a difficult one. If his defense of the MAGA kids was really an extension to defending his nephew.
He has a weird perspective on Trump.
And my defense of the Native American elder was supporting the 9-year-old me, then sharing a post that presented both sides fairly might be too much to bear. Brad must have saw me as one of the trolls who said unkind things about those kids. Or maybe he thought I was like those Buddhists who signed the petition to stand against suffering. That seemed to be a very black and white judgment of who I was. Although I understood the Buddhists who made the petition, I would never want anyone harmed because of their beliefs. I don't think they would either. Brad dropping our friendship seemed to counter what he had said about pushing people into a corner.
If you assume bad intent on somebody else's part, then you kind of push them into that.
Brad saw me doing all the pushing because he thought I wasn't holding space for both sides. He made this judgment because I would say I experienced racism, and he didn't believe it.
And a cop pulled us over.
Or because he was convinced I was overreactionary as a person of color. And while Brad thought I was the perpetrator, I could see from Brad's actions and not his words that Brad was actually pushing me, questioning my experiences, and then literally taking a break from our friendship. These were all examples of what he was advising me not to do in our previous talk.
So I don't want to say, you guys are all the bad guys, because it's very easy to be like, I'm the good guys and you guys are the bad guys.
We were basically having the same standoff those kids in the elder experience. Still, I was shocked sending a post made me lose a friend. I spent the next month fairly depressed and pissed off. It now seemed like the more I explored my wound, the angrier I was getting and making everyone else. At the same time, I really couldn't tell if it was just me, because the entire country seemed to be going through exactly what my family, friends, and I had been experiencing. I brought up what happened to my friend Nemanja in Serbia. I had made a bunch of films about him exploring love and loneliness.
We're not gonna see each other again. Never. She says never.
We even did a film with Brad.
If it is not with a meaning in the whole film, that, why? What's the purpose?
So I figured he'd have an objective point of view. Nemanja said Brad's opinion was similar to people in Serbia who were trying to exonerate themselves for their nationalism. He also said I needed to be careful not to be an Uncle Tom. I thought about the post again. That's when I realized there was something that united my father, Brad, and myself. We had all experienced trauma around race and religion in our youth. Before I sent the post to Brad, I had filmed my dad talking about how he witnessed his father being beaten for being a Baha'i when he was 5 years old.
One day, I was 6 years old. They came and attacked him because he was a Baha'i.
He could barely talk about it.
Since that day, my dad lost all of his livelihood. He never smiled again.
Then there was Brad's trauma when he got beaten up as a teenager.
Short version of the story is they just started running after us, and after a while were punching us,
And my situation at 9 years old. All of us had experienced serious trauma and had wounded children in us. Maybe this was why we were all at odds. Each of us had our own versions of how to face that pain.
What can I say?
My father chose to be strong within and avoid pain altogether.
There is one, then I am strong.
Brad found Zen Buddhism.
Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And I remember thinking, that's right.
And I was making this film to find a way to deal with it. I'm sure Mina, Andy, and Aaron had their stories too. I figured the best way to resolve my trauma and any of the other conflicts that had shown up while making the film was to do a role play with everyone. I'd have my parents, brother, Brad, Mina, Aaron, and Andy. Everyone who had been a part of the film so far. My dad started things off.
This is the way life is. We have to go back to individual.
He went on for a while on finding peace and strength within again.
We have to start with ourselves. This is the first step.
Okay, I'm glad you told us the first step. You've made it very clear many times over.
Thank you.
And as far as your perspective, I don't think anybody is any disagreement with that. After about 30 minutes of this and no one else talking,
I think there is something deep about human brain.
I said everyone could participate. No one's voice would be excluded.
Zen loves us.
Whoa! That's cosmic. Okay, so let's make it right now to change the temperature in the room. Everybody's allowed to talk. But when Brad and my dad and I are talking, you can giggle, you can laugh, it's okay. Let's not try to repress it.
Just be human.
Let's just let this be whatever it is without any control right now. And then maybe we'll control it later, okay?
Okay.
Brad was hesitant to participate at first.
I don't know what I have to say then.
Anything you want to say about whatever my dad said, your perspective on race? You can talk about how we had differences in what we were going through via email and stuff like that.
Well, it's...
He was very diplomatic and simply agreed with my dad's perspective.
Well, yeah, that can happen.
Because you're not there. You're not really pushing the button to...
Well, you have to.
You have to know what is going on. There are limited resources on this planet, and people that are competing for it.
Yeah.
And kept talking about having compassion and bringing balance to people who were wounded.
People come to me and they have like some deep, I've heard some deep pain from people, because I sit in little rooms with people during these retreats and I talk to each one of them. And sometimes they bring up some stuff to me that I go, oh my God, I don't know how you manage to get through life. But I've got to sit there and I've got to try to say, well, what balance can I bring to this situation with this person sitting in front of me?
That seemed peculiar to me. If he had compassion and wanted to bring balance, then why would he take a break from our friendship over a post? Why wouldn't he believe me when I said I was going through something? Why did he stand up for the MAGA kids or his nephew, but not me?
Thank you for that fairness in Iowa.
So I finally found the courage to ask him. And why would you want to take a break from our friendship just because I sent you a post about the MAGA kids treating that native like that? Like,
who just stops a conversation after 8 years.
Brad said it was because our conversations were reminding him of conversations he was having on Twitter.
Well, the whole thing, it has to do with my experience on Twitter and all this other stuff that was burning up, you know, my brain, and I just wanted to get out of that conversation, and I needed to clear it away.
He also said I was intense.
You get a bit intense, and sometimes sometimes I don't like to be that intense. You know, I just want to do what I do.
I thought that was a bit strange because he was the one constantly emailing me about race and asking me to explain things. He saw it the other way around.
I didn't email you telling you what I think.
Yeah,
I was just posting and distributing it publicly.
That's why I don't go on Facebook anymore. Yeah, so.
Then Brad complained that he couldn't say anything because the cameras were on and I'd manipulate what he said.
I don't actually like what we're doing here very much at all. Because you got this camera here with Andy Chin, and I'm pointing to him. And so we're having a conversation that would be best had without these cameras going on. Because I don't particularly want my words in this situation to live forever and to be, you're going to take it home, you're going to take all this material home and edit it, and you're going to make it sound the way you want it to sound. And I don't think that's a way to have a conversation about this stuff.
I had no intention of doing that. He could talk about the oneness of humanity like my dad.
So what you see is happening is a microcosm of what is going on even inside my own heart.
Or talk about Buddhism and call it a day.
Form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
That's when I noticed the difference between my father's perspective and Brad's.
So I don't know if I don't know if I have a race to represent.
And that was on the point of white privilege.
You know, I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm being called upon to represent white people, but I don't know if I know what white people think. You know what I mean?
Brad didn't think it existed.
Yeah, like in general.
But you're white.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, I'm cursed with that. But
I don't think you're cursed by it. It's a privilege in this country to be white.
Well,
all over the world, it's a privilege to be white.
I don't know. I don't know how much of a privilege it is.
Whenever I try to get deeper into that topic, Brad laughed me off. So I switched gears and just asked about our friendship. Why would he do that to a friend?
Like, I was really surprised all through the making of this film. And like, you kept sending me emails that were like, that's not racism, this is not racism. And I was dealing with all this trauma myself. And you didn't have the consideration at that time to think about what I was going through, and you just kept attacking me left and right.
Is that what I did?
Can I say something here?
I don't think that's what I did.
Brad felt ambushed. He also didn't want to deal with any of that on camera.
I don't want this out there.
It is great.
I want him to cut this scene.
Critical honesty, that's the whole idea. You have to be yourself.
I know, but
if you say, I don't want it, he gets it.
I'm giving in to him.
Yeah.
I should be fighting Pirooz.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think I should have a fist fight with Pirooz, and that would decide everything.
That's okay too.
Don't you think? Wrestle him or something. He's bigger than me, but
don't get into.
Trying to prevent this whole fucking time, y'all. No fist fights. Empathy. It's not funny. And that's why this shit never gets resolved. Because your generation fucking laughs. And everyone else suffers. It's not funny,
you know what?
And I care about you.
I'm going home now, so I guess you guys can do your movie.
Mina was the one that kicked Brad out. Let it be known.
What happened over there?
You don't have to leave.
I don't want to, this is...
Brad started laughing again. That's when Mina lost it and asked him to take me seriously.
It's getting ridiculous now. No, so now I got her attacking me and I got you attacking me and you're going...
That's okay. That's okay. Mina, we are making him...
Please take it seriously. Please take it seriously.
After Mina said that, Brad threw down his mic and left.
Please take it seriously.
Take what seriously?
Exactly. All right.
Just calm down.
Take what seriously? Okay, let's get out of here. Let's go home. All right.
Why do you want to go home?
And if there's a release, I'm not signing any release for this part of the film, and I don't want to be in it. And if you film me leaving, I don't want that in the movie either. So bye. See you later. So long.
I'm sorry.
I gotta get my jacket. Now I gotta be embarrassed and grab my jacket.
Then everyone at the shoot started arguing. Andy Chin, the camera operator, told me he disagreed with how I approached Brad.
Yeah. I would have walked out too, like in that same situation, because it was very like, it felt hypocritical to me because it's like, well, no, I'm trying to listen, but I felt like you weren't listening at all.
He felt like I attacked him and made it a pissing contest about who had the most pain.
I see his point of view. I see your point of view too. It's difficult. Like I feel like
nobody should be made to have a pissing contest about pain.
exactly. It should be a competition
But
about
we're
pain.
we're trying. We're not
That's what I
even
feel
trying
like. I
to
was watching
compete.
someone, right? But that's what it felt like to me watching this, and then it became a competition once you guys started talking because you guys, I think, both lost perspective on the point you're trying to make, and it just became a competition, and then he got triggered and walked out.
My dad agreed with Andy. Yeah, I don't think so.
I think so.
He said he felt compassion for Brad and wanted to hug him.
Right. But he's here a human being. Nobody's there for him. So, and I think he's he lost it. I think you have. I have so much compassion to him. I want to go there, hug him, give him love, and because I saw his pain.
Then Andy said I wasn't being fair to Brad because he was a public figure.
He's also like, it goes back to him being a public figure. Like I work around like public figures all day. Like it's just like their mind is in so many different headspaces.
Hannah thought Brad's behavior was strange, and he didn't like the energy in the room. He said it was wrong.
I think he just felt like he was being attacked.
Yeah, that's
because it was like you are a strong energy, and he's a very like just chill. So it felt like you were.
Then he blamed Mina for being too emotional and making everything go wrong.
And you are being really emotional, I think, Mina.
I'm not emotional,
I'm
y'all.
telling you, you just yelled at them out of nowhere when they're having a conversation.
Andy agreed with Panna about Mina.
Andy, I would be more inclined to agree with you if the context.
I think you're being very emotional right now.
I told him to be careful in blaming Mina for being too emotional because they were all emotional.
Actually, there is a point to be made here, Andy. And that is the fact that every time a woman speaks, men have the tendency to say that they're being emotional.
Thank you.
And then it discredits them from having a voice.
Let me say this then, bro.
Then Panna agreed he was emotional and started crying.
You know, and I feel a lot of emotions in here right now. And I don't think you should bring, I don't know, it's not right. All the stuff that's going on is not right. All the emotions, you guys are attacking people, it's not right. It's not. All the stuff that was going on here, that's not how it should go down. It's not. I'm telling you.
Mina tried to hug him and almost broke the microphone she was attached to.
I can feel it.
Whoa!
Then my mother started crying.
I enjoy to be with my children.
She said she just wanted everyone to get along because she had cancer.
When you have this sickness, you don't think about any discrimination or this or who is white or what religion or anything about that. You just want to love everybody and everybody loves you and enjoy your life.
Then my dad started crying and talked about truth.
Yeah, you were very emotional. I think this time you were disconnected from your emotion. I think, as Buddha said, it's just both are suffering. This tongue is a small muscle, but without the love, it can bring a lot of hurts. I think we are hurting each other with our tongue.
Then Yanni, my stylist in LA for the last 15 years, gave her perspective on Brad.
Very sensitive person. He's not really open to talk something that he don't want to talk about, and he feel if he will not be his side, he just okay, I'm walk away. I don't want to do it anymore.
Then everyone started crying and hugging.
I can't believe I tried this.
We are learning, you know. Life is learned. Yes.
My dad was completely silent. I had basically created a microcosm of America. Everyone was upset with everyone, and everyone had a different perspective. Brad emailed after that and called me a fake Mr. Rogers, and said he was upset I made him waste Mother's Day on a day when he'd rather be thinking about his mother that passed. Then he posted on his blog describing the whole event, and saying most of the same things he said in his email. I apologized to Brad and let him know it wasn't my intention to make him uncomfortable. I suggested we try again with just him and my dad. It was really damage control at that point. I also realized my father and Brad couldn't solve my issues. They had found their ways to manage their traumas, but that didn't mean their past would work for me, especially when my dad didn't believe in microaggressions.
I don't see racism, that's what I say. This is nationalism.
And Brad didn't believe in white privilege.
I don't know how much of a privilege it is.
So, as the two of them discussed their views,
But as soon as I open my mouth,
I thought back to the catastrophe the day before. Andy, my brother and father, thought I approached the situation the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think so.
But I didn't know any other way to make a film about what was happening to me. If people emailed or disagreed or yelled or cried, that was all a part of it. Brad had the same disclaimer on his blog. If anyone emails, he has the right to use it publicly. I also had that right, especially because everyone signed releases, including Brad. And Andy's point about Brad being a public figure made no sense to me.
Public figures all day. Like, it's just, like, their mind is in so many different headspaces.
If Peter Pan or Donald Trump started engaging me in this film, I wouldn't hesitate to confront them if I needed to, too. Maybe Andy was trying to express that I shouldn't out Brad publicly for his behavior because we were friends.
It's cute, huh?
Yeah, I like the picture.
I understood that sentiment. Don't make people look bad.
I don't want this out there.
But I was letting everyone be exactly what they were. None of us was perfect, and none of us was free from our biases, prejudice, or emotions. I was making a film about trauma, race, and identity. It wasn't necessarily going to be rainbows and gumdrops.
Bye. See you later. So long.
Still, I hadn't really solved any of the racial tension among any of them or myself. If anything,
Please take it seriously.
I'd actually made it worse. After that last talk with Brad and my father, my dad stopped calling me. Andy stopped calling me. Brad, Panna, everyone disappeared. I figured the film was a total failure. Then I remembered something I'd shot for Apocalypse Later. I asked the philosopher Wolfgang Schirmacher what to do on that film when it felt like it was failing. He told me to let it.
But you feel better. So you accept it as a failure, but you don't stop with this.
That gave me some hope. Maybe my failure was actually my success.
Bye. See you later. So you can also, when you are not fail, when you have success, you can get the same feeling than you would have with failure.
Healing my racial trauma wasn't going to be pretty. It would take tough conversations and confrontations and tears. And healing other people's racial tensions was also about going through the same type of growth. And that it meant even more pain and difficult talks. It was therapy, basically. I also realized there was another success after the catastrophe.
Bye. See you later.
I wasn't sad anymore. Or angry. I had actually gotten a chance to go through these stages of grief thanks to my dad, Mina, Brad, and everyone else. So I decided to keep going and edit the whole film together. I rewatched the fight scene and all the same feelings of anger and betrayal came up again.
Please take it seriously.
Then I realized something else. I was editing the talk with my father and Brad.
There is so much there.
It's just letting you have it.
You're a great speaker.
My father was talking, and I felt it. He loved me. He was still there, still supporting me. So was Brad. They had been so patient to me, while I had been the opposite to them. And Andy was right.
But you were trying to skewer the conversation towards one direction.
I had cornered Brad.
So what balance were you thinking about bringing to my situation?
I don't know what balance I was thinking about bringing to your situation.
I had made him uncomfortable, and everyone there. I might have a point with microaggressions. Yeah, but look at how many pine needles there are. White privilege, and people being insensitive.
What can I say?
But Andy was right, too.
Because I felt like you were trying to put words in his mouth.
Pushing or forcing an idea or apology was the wrong way to make a point. Why couldn't I be like Bobby? Why couldn't I let people be in a state of becoming?
We will always be unfinished.
My father and Brad were doing it in their way. It certainly wasn't perfect, but they were there. After all of this, they were still there. Like my dad said,
Love is the answer. Love is the answer. Love is the answer, my friend.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Love is the answer.
Yeah, it is.
maybe he was right. If I only pointed out what was wrong, how would we be able to come together?
It's cute, huh?
Yeah, I like the picture.
Maybe that was Brad's point all along.
If you assume a bad intent on somebody else's part, then you kind of push them into that.
None of us saw the same way as the other, but we were still there holding space. That was a definite success along with our failures. After that, I tried to record these camera addresses you're seeing now. I couldn't seem to get my hair right or match the frame exactly. I started losing it a bit. That's when I realized it. This film would never be perfect. Just like my relationship with Brad or my dad, we argued and fought and loved each other, but if we only held on to the ways each of us saw things, we would never be able to come together. The same with my mother, Andy, Mina, Aaron, my brother, and everyone else. Maybe all of us getting closer was simply a matter of trying. It wouldn't be pretty and it would take time, but if we stuck it out, it'd get better. That gave me more consolation, but I felt like I was missing something. I may have found a way to be at peace with everyone else, but what about all the grief, pain, and anger still inside me? That's when it hit me. All the role plays, discussions, tears, and fighting helped me pick up some of the pieces to the puzzle. But this film was ultimately about healing the 9-year-old me. What did he want? I saw myself after the incident. I couldn't talk about it with my dad or mom. I had to be strong like my dad.
It's only love makes me strong.
I remember walking to Mrs. Farster's house to play with Jay and John. My brother Payman was walking with me. Jay and John ran inside and closed the garage door.
Hello.
As soon as they saw that, I looked at Payman and said, "They don't want to play with us because we're Iranian." My brother nodded his head, and we walked back home. I spent the next 3 months in my room by myself. Then John came to my door one day. I asked him why he closed the garage door and ran away. He said Jay was having a sleepover, but he could only invite one person. I said, "Oh, I thought you didn't want to play with me because I was Iranian." He said, "No, he wanted to play with me." That made me feel so much better. He was my best friend after that, John and Jay, and we played kick the can and all the rest every day. I realized then that the 9-year-old me wanted to talk to kids about what happened. They would understand him. And I understood that as an adult as well, because no 9-year-old kid quite understands what racism is. They might just be able to offer the healing I needed. So I tried to find a school in LA that would let me film kids. I tried everything. Elementary schools, art schools, high schools, nothing. So I figured that was that. I ended up taking a job overseas to make ends meet. I was sitting in a hotel restaurant talking about the film when an artist, Chris,
in the organizations I work for, we work, at Sky Art, we work really similarly.
Told me she does PR for a school in Chicago. She told me that it was an art school for inner city kids that didn't have art in their regular education.
Where teaching artists teach by practice.
She thought they'd be happy to have me. I figured it was worth a shot. I had never been to the south side of Chicago. The cab driver told me I'd get mugged right away and not to take out my camera. As we drove through Westridge, an Indian and Pakistani neighborhood, I asked the cab driver where we were. He told me he had no idea about these monkeys. Then he told me Chicago was a great place because of its diversity. It was the longest drive of my life. When I finally got to Sky Art, my entire experience of the school was the opposite of my cab ride. A week went by like nothing. Has anyone ever not been nice to you because you're different? Can you tell me about it?
Because first I never had glasses, but then now everybody, sometimes at my school, they call me a nerd a lot. That means you're smart.
How can we treat people when they are different from us? What can we do?
You could play with them and tell them that they're nice and they're pretty and stuff like that.
Oh, I like that. That's a good idea. My class was called Movies and Comics. I basically showed them parts of the film and asked how they would make the world a better place. Oh, you're jamming to the music. Some of them drew pictures saying to help the environment. Some just said to be nice to each other.
If someone isn't nice, I'll tell them stop.
Good. Did everybody hear that? One student wanted to explain who Dr. King was to all the others.
Dr. King was born in, I think, Selma, Alabama.
Then I asked them if they had any advice for the 9-year-old me. One student told me I needed to accept me for my differences.
I would tell 9-year-old Pirooz to embrace his differences, acknowledge them inside and out.
I was thrown off a bit by that. It was like I heard it wrong, like she was critiquing me at first. But then that vanished and it sunk in. It was strange. I listened to each student offer their advice.
I would tell 9-year-old
I would tell 9-year-old Pirooz.
And this weight inside me started to lift.
Because one day, you are going to be someone special.
I told my dad about the feeling and he seemed to understand. I guess something similar had happened to him after the last role play we did. When I played myself and my dad played himself.
So, young man, where are you from?
I ended up emotional. And my dad was just angry.
You cannot do that.
What do you mean I can't do that?
No, we are here. You have to cut his hair.
Then I played my dad, and my dad played me as a kid. My dad broke down.
We're gonna get good cut, and then we are gonna go to nature center. We're gonna go and to your favorite place and walk.
Then I asked my dad to play the racist. I told him to ask the child's ethnicity and then kick them out.
You're gonna come in and then ask Brooke where she's from, and then when you don't like where she's from, you tell her to get out of your store, okay?
My dad couldn't do it.
The acting doesn't matter, we're just doing the exercise.
I cannot act that.
I told him to play it any way he wants.
Where are you from?
Iran.
Great. How are you doing? Welcome.
Thank you.
After he said that, we all cried.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Love you.
Love you too.
Thanks, bro. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sorry I got
Thank
mixed
you.
up with
Sorry I got late.
It was really nice to
Very
meet
nice
you.
meeting you.
My therapist said doing the role play in the film would help me. It's been a roller coaster of emotions. I don't cry anymore, though. I also never thought I'd be so close to my dad.
I'm here to waiting to see a movie.
We still don't agree about everything.
I'm having a difficult time with the ending of the movie. I don't know what to do.
But he understands me now.
Do you remember the Princess Bride movie we watched together when you were 5, 6 years old?
5, 6 years old. I was 12 years old.
I know he's not perfect, and I'm not either.
I thought that was a good way, you know, you can end your movie just like that, just like Princess Bride.
That no one is. That we're all in a state of becoming, and that requires a certain respect and forgiveness for everyone.
My dream is coming along.
For my father,
Sometimes I dream in Farsi, yeah. I dream someday to go back.
Brad.
But like, you know, I was thinking like a horror movie, like instead of Blackenstein, you have like Persianstein. He's like a Persian Frankenstein.
Persianstein. I kind of like the Barber.
I retired 3 years ago, and I sold it 5 years before that, so it's been about 8 years.
And most of all, me.
I was wondering if I could ask you about way back in the day when I got my haircut there. I actually came in with my dad a long time ago, and you said that I was Iranian, so you didn't want to cut my hair.
I realized something as I was talking to the barber. He wasn't that different from me. In fact, he was me, and I was him.
I never said that to anybody.
Oh, you never said that?
All the pushing I had done since I remembered the incident.
This child and me, I went through a difficult thing, Dad.
No, I think you're talking about Frank Casavera.
Was really an extension of what I received from him all those years ago.
So what balance are you thinking about bringing to my situation?
I don't know what balance I was thinking about bringing to your situation.
He was the owner then. He's dead and gone. He died, oh God, 83, or I'm sorry, 03.
Brad.
So if you want a movie, you gotta have something happen.
My dad.
Pine needle comparing to a pine needle to a tree. They are different stories.
The cop.
And a cop pulled us over.
The neighbor. I just wanted to be loved, to be accepted.
The trees were large.
And when I felt like I wasn't, I attacked and saw the world just like he did.
No, I never understood Frank. Frank had his own mind, and I never tried to get into it.
Maybe Frank Castellari was just a little immigrant boy like me. And one day, someone did what he did to me, to him.
Called the police. I remember that.
And he attacked and saw the world like I had been doing.
Thank you for that fairness in Iowa.
But it was time to forgive the barber in me.
Have any idea what Frank was? Why?
Yeah,
Frank
yeah.
was Frank.
And if someone disagreed with me or didn't want to be my friend, it didn't mean they didn't love me.
Okay, so he was just like that. There was nothing anybody could do, right?
No, he was like that with everybody. It didn't matter what nationality or anything.
Maybe that was when the barber was in them too. Maybe he was in all of us.
That's how bad he was. It just wasn't you.
Okay, good. And it takes seeing that and loving and forgiving that part of me that can make the world a better place. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't give you more closure. Like I said, I didn't.
No, it's just great that I got a chance to talk to you and know that it wasn't my imagination, you know?
Right. No. He was just tough on, you know, that was just him. He was a hothead, you know. He could get break nasty. He was ornery. And quite a few of my customers used to say, Frank was ornery.
Well, thank you.
You want to call it ornery.
Thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate it. From the bottom of my heart.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.